Allan, you've watched a lot of this. You have advised a lot of political candidates over the years. Does style now trump substance in politics?
Well, sure, but let's not get carried away about how new any of this is. It's been forever thus. Adlai Stevenson had a group of speechwriters called the Elks Club that contained a Pulitzer Prize-winning Archibald MacLeish, as I recall from memory. He almost wore them out. He wanted a different speech every time. He was very concerned about his public image. Napoleon used to read his orders of the day to his corporal in the hopes that if his corporal understood them, his generals would. So communication skills have forever been with us. And in terms of the multi-channel universe, which I agree exists, to the best of my knowledge, most people still only watch one television program at a time.
Scott says it's an artificial distinction between image and policy. Do you think it is?
Well, I think we agree, because I think it's much more nuanced than the decision between substance and image, because the academic studies show that many good, decent voters use the term image or leadership or feel, something intangible, as a metaphor or a substitute for the policy or the decisions made or the substance of the person. So it's all wound up together. Let me give you a quick example. Timothy Krause, in a famous old book on journalism, said, called Boys on the Bus, said a well-run bus is a well-run country. Meaning, if you make the bus run on time, don't lose the luggage, arrive in Moose Jaw when you said you were going to arrive, have beer and cookies on the bus for the reporters, you will be deemed to be capable of running the country. Well, I thought this was really superficial when I read it years ago, and I went to Columbia University to talk to Herbert Gans, a famous sociologist, and he said to me, as only an older man could counsel a younger man, look, if you can't run a bus, how on earth are you ever going to run the country? So sometimes these superficial metaphors have a substance behind them. There's one more reason why that picture of Bob Stanfield dropping the football made the papers, because I've looked at the entire roll of film at CP. He was an older man, he was awkward, even when he caught it he looked bad, and that was very representative of what happened that day, and not the worst picture at all.
Can you say that again by saying, I want everybody to have a job?
Yeah. I don't like unemployment. I want everybody to have a job.
Okay, now this is what you do today, so I want to start with you, Allan. This is obviously not the very comfortable in his own skin Bill Davis who, you know, in the 1980s would win back his majority government. This is a guy who's 41 years old and not all that comfortable in his own skin at this point. But is that how it still works today?
Well, yeah, look, I went on the web and took a look at some of the slogans that are in Prime Minister speeches, Premier speeches, and so on and so forth. The Alberta Premier recently made a speech called The Way Forward. I should hope so. How can you go backwards? Saskatchewan's tagline is Saskatchewan strong and steady. Newfoundland standing strong in the fight against poverty. Not necessarily doing anything about it,
but standing
strong. The flexing of thigh muscles and calf muscles are addressing poverty in Newfoundland. Every job counts in BC. Now, when I have somebody in media training who says something vacuous like that, I say, oh, hold on. If I were still working in a newsroom, stop the presses. Let me find the jobs that don't count. That's the story I want to do. In other words, you use the obverse. So sure, it's still, what is the substance of the matter? And then you'd say to Bill Davis, you know, look at me, the interviewer, ignore the camera, lean forward, look more engaged, the kind of things that you have done for decades naturally. But it's also a balancing act. The substance behind these slogans and the performance so people pay attention. Well, I think Ignatieff is a great example of how image and substance are wound together and may even mean the same thing. And here's what I mean. He's gone from a weak positive to a weak negative, and with Herculean efforts may crawl all the way back up to a weak positive. If a group like this had been sitting around with him 5, 8 years ago, and he said, you know, I might want to come back to Canada and run, one of us would have said, not a bad idea. Let's get one of the Liberal provincial premiers to appoint you to some kind of position to study something. Let's make you a one-man royal commission. Let's get you making some speeches. Let's at least put you in charge of some NGO or charity.
Let's bring you to Canada.
In other words, he didn't have an entrance strategy, and that is a leadership flaw that is unmistakable. And the fact that journalists and others view him as a little awkward or out of it, and you noted that he said Regent's Park about Toronto when it's Regent Park. Small point, but it's emblematic of the fact that he didn't do his homework and didn't have an entrance strategy years before he made this move.
Allan Bonner, Political Conventions, The Art of Getting Elected and Governing. That's his latest book. My thanks to the three of you as well.